One, two. Is this on? Sorry I haven't uploaded anything in a week. I had a life event. I'll go into it another time. I also had a problem with my camera. I'm sure you can see the different background behind me. Trying something new as long as I had the chance to, shake things up a bit. Today I'm going to be doing basically a throwaway with a gaming meme. This did go longer than I had originally intended, but I hope it's interesting. The meme itself predates the internet. People at the time were selling buttons and t-shirts with the phrase "ask me about my character" or "don't talk to me about your character" on them. This is because gaming used to be more of an introvert hobby than an extrovert one. And when a lot of introverts are in one place together, awkward small talk happens. This also took place in a time when talking about a character was often a mixture of numbers and adjectives and maybe backstory, but almost never about events in the game itself. Now, talking about your character is a lot more interesting than it was in the late 80s, early 90s. So today I'm going to talk to you about one of my characters. I'm going to try to make it interesting by commenting on both the character's backstory and the out-of-character way she came about, which is why it went long. You see, I was at Dragon Con back in 1996. I signed up to play a few role-playing events and a few board game events, and basically just spend the rest of the time wandering around the con. One of those events was a board game of Risk. I showed up with four other players. We sat and talked and waited for the host to show up. And after a while, someone came by and said we weren't allowed to loiter there. And we said we were there to play a game. All of us had tickets. So then we had to go and get those tickets stamped to show that the moderator was a no-show. We got generic tickets to use in their place. So I went over to the RPGA area. I had just gotten my membership in the RPGA specifically to play Living City. I noticed they had a setting called Living Death as well, and that this was in the Ravenloft Dungeons & Dragons setting, specifically the Mask of the Red Death subsetting. I was a huge fan of Ravenloft at the time, still am, and even chatted on occasion with Steve Miller, the line editor at TSR, on TSR Online. I went to the RPGA table and asked someone there to help me make a character with the intention of using the generic ticket to get into the Living Death event. I don't remember who helped, but I do know that they misinformed me. I chose to play a wizard. At the time, I was gravitating toward wizard characters in general, and my Living City character was a wizard. I deliberately went in the opposite direction than I had done with Living City. My LC character, Jarl, was up strength, dexterity, and intelligence, so I figured this character should be up constitution, intelligence, and charisma. I was told that Living Death required kits. That was a thing back in 2nd edition. So I chose the Kabbalist kit. This one had a charisma requirement, but the higher your charisma, the more weird and creepy you came across in your interactions. I thought this would be a good role-playing challenge, to think my character is being influential while actually being the opposite. I was told that LD was a high-risk setting, and that hit points were half of the die. And I didn't want a 2 hit point character, so I made sure my con was high enough to max out my bonus. Had a lot of fun, then equipping the character with nonsense items from the Sears Roebuck catalog. The setting of Mask of the Red Death was a real-world 1890s Gothic Earth. As a wizard, there wasn't much in the way of necessary equipment to get, so I just picked things that sounded fun. And then I needed a name. I sat for a while and thought about it. I remembered something that Chris Claremont once said. Why isn't the character a woman? I didn't have an answer. But I did have a name then. My current character in my Home Forgotten Realms game was Delianni Ellison. A fine fantasy name. Not so good for the 1890s of Earth. But I cut that name in half for Delianni, and Deli for short. For a last name, I took the name of an author I had really gotten into over the prior year, Harlan Ellison. So Delianni Ellison was born. But now I had a whole set of equipment for a male wizard, and in the setting of Earth 1890, men and women's equipment cost different. Re-equipping wouldn't be just flavoring the robes or armor of your typical D&D character from male to female. These were completely different fashions, completely different prices. I made a decision born out of desperation and a lack of time before the event started that altered the character from that point on. Delianni became a transvestite. She wore men's clothes. She wasn't a lesbian. She wasn't a subversive. She wasn't making a political or social statement. She just preferred it. Her backstory was that she was the granddaughter of a wizard in the Society of the White Rose, the organization that all characters in Living Death were a member of, all player characters. And he was the one who taught her magic. In 1888, he died in Chicago, leaving her in the hands of the society. So I played Delianni's low dexterity to cause her to have trouble with women's clothing. I would often complain that the buttons were on the wrong side when forced to wear a dress to a fancy function or something. She also avoided the high heel shoes that had once been men's fashion, but they had abandoned it in the 18th century, and French fashion made it exclusively women's clothing. I played at the event called the Judge's House and had a great time. I found out there were other events in the setting and decided to look for other conventions that had them available. I even drove from Princeton, West Virginia to Springfield, Ohio to play events at Keith's first GuruCon. Gary and I drove up. We intended to play 3 events and drive back the same day, but we got lost on the way up and only got to play 2. This was a time before cell phones, so we couldn't exactly call and say we're on our way. At Gen Con 98, 2 years later, I created a backup character, the Marquis de Carabas. He was based on the character of the same name from the BBC TV show Neverwhere. If anyone's interested, I can talk about him another day. But at that Gen Con, I bought some new dice and decided they would be exclusively Delianni's. I played the event Strange Occurrences and went through the whole thing without needing dice at all until the very end. At the end, we were spying on the bad guys as they did their ritual. None of the other players were doing anything about it, but we were there to stop it. So I had Delianni step forward and offered to help. Villains accepted me, and I held the chalice while they did their thing. And the liquid in the chalice, which started out as blood, spilled on my hand, or on Delianni's hand. So I asked if it was still blood. The judge said it didn't look like blood, so I sniffed it. Didn't know what it was, so I licked it. Judge had me make a saving throw. So this is the first die roll for me of the game. This was my best save. I was fairly confident in it, but I failed. He then had me make a system shock roll. I was very good at this due to my high constitution, but failed that as well. I feel like there was a third roll in there that I also failed. The judge then said that the elixir turned me into a vampire, and I crashed through the window and ran off into the night. So I offered to give my character to the campaign coordinator, Claire, for use in a future mod, and the judge said I should do that. I later found out the rest of the players thought I was a planted player playing a non-player character, and that this was supposed to happen. Claire told me that the judge made a mistake. I would have had to drunk the whole chalice to turn into a vampire, and she let me keep my character. To her consternation, I played the rest of the campaign with Delianni trying to find a cure for vampirism. Delianni went through a lot of changes over the 10-year campaign. One thing that remained the same was that she blamed the Red Death for everything bad that had ever happened to her. She developed a personal vendetta against the Red Death and sought any and every advantage in order to destroy it, even to her own detriment. When the Society said they had found a way to banish the Red Death, she disagreed with that as a plan, but did go along with it. She planned to seal herself away as well. She was going to kill the Red Death and die trying. In the final interactive event, she found out her mind had been magically altered at some point. She asked for it to be removed and was told that only after the Red Death was sealed away would her memory be restored. She took this to mean that the White Rose had been the ones to alter her memory, even though I knew differently. So the character sat and tried to remember something, anything real. It went back to her grandfather's death, before she started as a player character. She remembered her vow at that time to kill the Red Death and decided that the only goal she had that she could count on to be her own, since she didn't know when the magical alteration started, was that. So that was the only goal she had left going into the finale. Now, in the finale, the judge allowed the Red Death to cast 4 spells on me, on Delianni, in the same round to stop her from charging through the portal and physically attacking the Red Death. So while the rest of the table were fighting the minions and protecting Merlin, who was casting the banishment spell, she was attacking through the open portal and moving ever closer. The final round, just before she stepped through, Delianni was the target of 3 Save or Die spells that she passed all of them, and a 4th spell which was Flesh to Stone, and that was the one that finally stopped her. Again, the judge was breaking game mechanic rules regarding timing and action economy to stop me from fulfilling my character's destiny. Even though it would have had no difference to the outcome of the event, the character would have still been removed from the battle. The only change was to deny me my character's reason for being there in the first place. So when we made Fellowship of the White Star out of an altered world similar to Living Death, I've already mentioned the phenomenon of filing off the serial numbers, I gave Delianni her ending. She went through the portal, never to be seen or heard from again. And then when the recent White Star finale happened, a player at my table had a near-death experience, and I knew that the player was expecting his character to die in this event. I knew he had plans for what happened next for the character because we'd visited the afterlife in one session in the campaign. So I leaned over to him and I said, "Hey, your character can survive this, or," and I showed him what would happen. And he chose his ending. So my character to you is, have you had a character you got to play from start to finish like that? No premature death, no possible retcon or return from retirement. Tell me about it. Tell me about your character. Tell me about your experiences down in the comments.